How's it going today, guys? It's a little bit after 9 o'clock. I've had my 8:30 latte, so I am ready to go with this video. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about the lowest risk investments that there are out there. So I recently did a video on the highest risk investments that you could possibly have or basically invest your money in. And I thought it would be interesting to, in contrast, look at what the lowest risk investments are. Now, honestly, other than maybe a certificate of deposit, I really don't recommend these as investments simply because the return on these is so low, and even with something like a mutual fund or just some of the very, very low risk investments, but not the lowest risk investments, you can get much better returns. But anyways, let's just get right into it. So these are what I see as the 5 lowest risk investments out there. They're really in no particular order here. These are just 5 very low risk investments. Anyways, number 1 is a certificate of deposit. And like I said, this might be one that I might recommend to you, and this is basically the scenario that this would be. Maybe you're somebody who's looking to buy a house, and you have some money saved up, and you know you're not going to buy a house for maybe 5 years. Let's say you have $10,000 sitting around. Rather than leave that money in your checking account, where you're earning a very, very small rate of return, I would recommend opening up a certificate of deposit and just kind of putting that money in there where you're going to at least get some kind of return. It's not going to be a lot, it's going to be a very small amount, but it's still at least better than what you're getting from that checking account. So rather than have your money sit in your checking account for 5 years or your savings account, I would recommend a certificate of deposit in that scenario. But other than that, I really don't recommend this as an investment simply because the returns are so low. Obviously, if this is money for like the down payment on a house, you don't want to be risking that money to the point where maybe 5 years down the road you're ready to buy and you're down on your investment. So that's where I would maybe recommend a certificate of deposit, is that situation. But anyway, a CD is the safest and most boring investment that exists. There's really nothing to it. You can get them through your bank or through your broker. And basically with a CD, you deposit the money for a specified length of time for a guaranteed rate of return. That's basically it. If you take the money out early, there's usually a penalty, and it's usually some amount of interest that you've earned back. So maybe like the last 3 months of interest or whatever, or there's some kind of penalty that they'll have on there. So if you draw early, they may take some amount of interest back from what they would have given you on that. But if you basically let it sit there until maturity, then you will just basically get that amount of money plus that amount of interest that they had promised to you. This is a fixed interest rate that does not change, and as long as you're getting a CD that is through a bank that is FDIC insured, that you as the borrower are then FDIC insured for up to $250,000 on principal. So as long as you have less or equal to $250,000 in that CD, you're guaranteed and you're insured for $250,000, and you can't lose any of the principal. So that is why that's basically why I see a CD as the lowest risk investment out there. Maybe it's equal to bonds, municipal bonds and U.S. savings bonds, but they're all kind of the same tier of ultra low risk and very, very, very low return. Number 2 is what's called TIPS, or Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. These are basically bonds that have 2 methods of growth. First of all, you have a fixed interest rate that does not change, so this is just a constant. But the second piece of this is a guaranteed inflation protection where interest rises with the rate of inflation. So for example, you might have a TIPS that pays 0.35% as that fixed rate, but let's say inflation over that time period is averaging at 2%. That's basically like getting a 2.35% return because you're getting the rate of inflation plus that very small rate of return that's just that fixed interest rate. The only way that you could lose money on this is if we're in a period of deflation. At that point, if the deflation rate exceeds what that fixed interest rate is, you could lose money on this form of investment, basically. TIPS can be purchased individually or through a mutual fund that will expose you to multiple different bonds. Again, very, very simple, very safe investment. Not a lot to it, guys. These are the kind of things that you just set it and forget it. This isn't the kind of thing where it's going to be an active investment. Number 3 is one that people may argue with me on. It is peer-to-peer lending. And basically the argument is, okay, yeah, if you make a really stupid loan and you give it to somebody and you don't screen your borrowers, yeah, this could be a high-risk investment. But as long as you're screening your potential borrowers, this is a very low-risk investment. And I would say you could probably get a decent return from this, probably a lot better than what you would get from a CD or one of these Treasury inflation-protected securities or bonds. Basically, with this, you're lending your money to someone else, and they're going to pay you back the principal plus interest. If you screen your loans and choose the best rated borrowers, this is a very low risk investment. However, if you do not screen your loans, this can be a very high risk investment. So just for an example, Lending Club is one of the biggest sites out there that facilitates this peer-to-peer lending, and they have a default rate of 5%. So that means that 95% of the borrowers are good and pay back that money plus that interest. So as long as you can pick out the best people and you're not falling in those 5% who default, then you should get your money back and get a nice little rate of return. And some of these sites allow for microloans as small as $25. So not a whole lot of risk involved there, and not a ton of return, but probably better than what you would see with some of these other investment vehicles here. Number 4 is a money market fund, and basically this is a type of mutual fund characterized as having low risk and low returns, or basically just a place to park cash. This is not somewhere that you're putting your money as an investment. This is a place to basically put your money in between investing it. So maybe you have concerns about the market and you just want to take your money out and put it in cash and earn a very small rate of return. You might do a CD or a money market fund. The advantage of a money market fund is you can get your money out of it without having to pay a penalty of any kind because you're not locked in for any time period. But basically this is a fund that includes a portfolio of low risk, high quality investments. Now don't mistake high quality investments as something that gives you a high return. In general, the higher quality the investment is, the lower return there's going to be because there's not a lot of risk associated with that investment. So you're going to get a very low rate of return. The goal of a money market fund is not to lose any principal. And the idea is to keep the net asset value at $1 per share at all costs. These are, like I said, meant to be a place to park cash, not necessarily a long-term investment. Then number 5 is my 5th very low risk investment. This would be municipal or U.S. savings bonds. So basically, when a government at the state or local level needs to borrow money, they don't go out there and get a credit card. They basically issue a municipal bond. And municipal bonds are exempt from federal income tax, and many states exempt them from state taxes as well. So many people like these investments for that reason alone. And it makes sense for these to be tax exempt because we're basically investing money into our own governments. So it's to our benefit to have people investing in this. So it makes sense that these are exempt from taxes in many cases. So this is a smart investment for those who are looking to minimize their exposure to taxes. But other than that, I really don't recommend these as an investment unless you're looking for something that's very, very low risk. Now this type of investment is very low risk because the likelihood of the borrower defaulting on their obligations is extremely low. It has happened in the past, but it is very, very unlikely that a municipal government will default on their obligations and not be able to pay back the bond. And then we have U.S. savings bonds, and these are backed by the federal government. The interest rate on U.S. savings bonds is very low. However, it is worth mentioning that if you have a Series EE bond, you are guaranteed basically to have that double in value over the course of 20 years. So let's say if you had a bond that was going to be worth $100 and you paid $50 for it, if you held that to maturity for 20 years and it was a Series EE, that would be worth $100 20 years later. And if you average that out over those 20 years, that's an average 3.5% return per year. Not a terrible return, but obviously you can do better very easily in most cases in good markets with other investment vehicles. But anyways, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this video. This was more of just a curiosity piece. This wasn't necessarily things that I would recommend that you guys invest in, unless you're looking for very low risk investments. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and then consider subscribing to be notified of any future uploads. And as always, I thank you guys for watching this video.